Make a post. Hey, Mr. Respecter, how are you doing? Make sure I have all the things up.
Good afternoon, David. How are you?
Andrea, how are you? I'm doing well. I can't complain. Pretty happy.
Exhausted. It was a long day.
I understand that.
Had a little bit of a event session this afternoon, and yeah, that wasn't good.
Sometimes we just need to get it all out. I can relate to that. We'll just wait. We'll let some people filter in, and then we'll start. Farm cat, let's see.
I'm pressing the wrong buttons.
I do that all the
Tells
time.
you what kind of day I'm having. Holy crap.
I can relate to that. Today was actually an easy day for me where a lot of our main technologies failed today, like based on other people, and so I sent all my employees home early.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, they were pretty excited. So. Oh, and that's right, Audacity. Recording tool. Hello everyone. Let's see who's on Twitch. Let's see where there's 5, Rosie. And there's other people, but it never tells me. It's so hard to. So hard to tell. Okay. Just give a few moments for everyone to filter in. Hey James, what's up? You're here. Oh, he's gone. He left quick. But he's back. His mic is on.
I accidentally disconnected like right after you said, "What's up? How you doing?" Click.
I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm good. So start thinking about where you want to take me for pizza.
Oh, when are you going to be here?
2 months.
Do you have a place to stay?
Not yet. I
You'll
haven't
stay
decided
by
where I'm
me.
going to stay yet. Okay.
Very good. You won't like murder me and you won't like murder me and like take everything I have. Well, to be honest, if you murder me, just take everything. I don't need it at that point, I guess.
Put it to good use.
Yeah, like at least try to do good with it.
Yeah, I'll host meditations with it.
There you go. You could sit on this couch. That'd be sick. You're always welcome to stay with me. You could probably stay with Greg too if you want to be more in the Brooklyn area.
Yeah, definitely.
If not, I have a bunch of friends.
There's a Vipassana center I've been looking at in New York, so
There's actually a Vipassana center on like 1 block away from where I work. But they're only open from like noon to 3 p.m., which is not a
strange.
work. Well, it's not a work friendly time, right? But we'll see. Oh, stretching. Let's wait a few more minutes. But James, definitely, I got some pizza places in mind, and I will let you know that I'll reach out to some people. There's some really good pizza places around here.
Oh yeah, it's
But-
like it's the only place to get like genuinely delicious like pizza, in my opinion.
So, what's your style pizza? Do you like pretentious white pizzas? You know, like the pizzas that they would make at home in Italy, or are you looking for like New York topping pizzas? Like what?
New York pizza. I like a pizza that's slightly more slightly crunchier than normal.
But you can fold it.
I always enjoy that. Yeah,
No, I know
folding
exactly
is
what you want.
folding is nice.
I got some good places for Zeph hosted. What's up? Thank you. Yeah, let's see who else is here on Twitch. Maybe he'll tell me. Nope.
yeah.
It's always a plus if you can get a lot of bacon on your pizza.
Yo, we'll bring our own if not. I think I just ordered.
We
I
just
got
bring like a large bag of bacon.
so the amount of bacon you put is just
Why
unsatisfactory.
have it be a bag when it could be like a sack of bacon?
A sack of bacon. A heavy sack of bacon. Like it looks like we're holding like a bag of wet towels. It's like bring the bacon.
I mean, like as you know, I eat an inordinate amount of bacon. I just got 12 pounds today, so I'm good for the next 24 days.
David's blood bacon level is pretty high on average.
I consume a lot. I eat pretty healthy. I go to the gym every day. Whatever. We'll see. Haven't died yet.
Eating lots of healthy fats and then going to the gym and getting exhausted is a great combination.
Body Awareness Respecter says bacon's not healthy. I disagree. I think you've fallen into the propaganda.
Wait, have you ever smoked bacon before?
Like on a smoker?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yay.
Are you kidding?
I think that's the first time I heard you talk.
Same.
Hello. Like, I even think I heard Respecter talk before you. Which is strange.
Nothing brings more people here than bacon. So we should probably try to start soon, just because I know that Greg wants to lead group meditation at 10. And I want to try to just cover as much material as humanly possible, like in an intelligent way. And there's also a few things which I want to discuss because some people kind of corrected my translation last time on r/Buddhism. Generally nice people. Some real non-winners there, if you will, also. It is what it is. Some people, I guess, they're really bound.
Non-winners. I'm so confident that you voted for Trump. You're just a non-winner.
We'll pass. Okay. So how to begin? We'll just start. Let me click a little recording button. Okay. So thank you very much for coming, everyone. Dhammapada, stage 2. I just wanted to take a moment. I wanted to review what we learned last week, and then we'll go on. We'll just continue forward. And again, like questions, ideas, discussions, disagreements, like let's have them. Let's post it in #study group or on Twitch or whatever. Let's try to get conversation. And there's also a couple of corrections that I want to make on what someone had showed me on r/Buddhism. So it began off with book 1. Book 1 had this incredible, like it started off immediately with something very complex, that the mind precedes all mental states. This is really, really interesting, as in all forms of philosophy, theology, whatever it is, makes assumptions. There's always an assumption. Like an assumption with science is that measurement observation is actually true. I mean, from like a capital T true perspective. I mean, when it comes to theology, there's generally revelation or prophecy, and that this is what determines true. God said it, so it's true. Philosophy is generally bound by logic. Now, I don't think any of these are better than the other. It's just which one you decide to consider important for yourself. Now, the way that the Dhammapada begins is authority and its assumptions. It says, mind precedes all mental states. There's people that have said this as well. I mean, specifically in English, you had David Hume say such a thing like, 1800 years later, where he generally rejected all philosophy, all theology, and rejected, humanity in general. He said that we're all just playing silly games, that we have a flawed perception, a flawed sense of logic, and we can't really even pretend that there's anything that we can know, let alone something that's knowable. Even if something was knowable, we can't come to know it because we're flawed. And this begins in a similar way. It says the mind precedes all mental states. That before whatever it is that we think or that we understand or that we sense or that we relate to in every single way, what exists before it is the mind. And the mind itself is a flawed object. He says that we need to emancipate ourselves from it. He says that it's flawed, it's impure generally, we need to try to fix it. But the point being is the everyday person who hasn't done a lot of work has a flawed mind. And so everything that they perceive is delusional or at least incorrect, right? And this is kind of a very interesting first sentence. It says, mind's their chief, etc. But that's the main thing. He then goes on and on. He talks about a lot of characteristic traits that's good or it's bad to have. So, for example, it's bad to sit there and think negatively about others. It's bad to have quarrels. It's bad to be weak. It's bad to be strong. It's all these type of balance type of issues. He says something very interesting where he says, those who mistake the unessential for essential and the essential for the unessential, he believes that we should understand things as they actually are, and what's important, what's not. We should separate them and not make a mistake. He talks about a lot of things that people err in, that they consider some things to be very, very important, wealth, like dating, things like this. But truthfully, it's not very, very important. It's unessential. What's essential is that the mind precedes all states, that we should try to perfect the mind, etc. Okay. Someone keeps pinging. Just ping me in #study group. And I said the statement last week, which I think is incorrect. It's incorrect because the translation's incorrect. Where I'm trying to find it. I thought it was around 21. Where what I said last week is that it seemed to me that the Dhammapada was saying that if you have bad characteristic traits, that you should put on the robes and become a monk, and that this will bring you through a sense of study that will purify you of these things. But I base this on the translation here on the word should. But it turns out that when you look at other translations, it's not what he's saying. He's saying that you need a certain level of purity to even begin to put on the robe. And the nuance here is rather significant. The significant nuance is that the way that I was understanding it is that if you're putting on a robe, it's because you had problems. Here it seems that the Buddha is saying that if you put on the robe, it's because you're starting to solve a lot of good problems. So it's exactly the opposite of that. But it remains essentially the same conclusion which I made, where he says in 19 and 20, where he says, much those he recites the sacred text, but acts not accordingly. That heedless man is like a coward, one who herds cows and only counts the cows of others. He does not partake in the blessings of the holy life. So that's a bad thing. Over recitation of texts, under practice. And 20 says, little though he recites the sacred text and puts the teaching into practice, forsaking his lust, hatred, delusion, true wisdom, emancipated mind, clinging to nothing, this and other world, he partakes in the blessings of life. So the Buddha is obviously the opinion that the texts are, they're important, but you should recite them little and you should practice lots. It's verbatim what he says. And then we begin with chapter 2. He talks about heedlessness and heedfulness, that there are things that we follow and there are things that we do not follow, that we shouldn't follow bad things, but we should generally follow good leaders who have good principles, and we should follow them, and they'll teach us a bunch of great stuff and become good people. He says at the end, the monk who delights in heedlessness and looks with fear at who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear at heedlessness will not fail. He's close to Nibbana, which is the last paragraph here in book 2. The point being is that you should follow in the right path of good people and you should avoid the path of bad people, and that this will ultimately bring you closer. Now, it says, it's rather kind of explicit here in the Buddha that he believes that the purification of good traits will lead us to a pure mind, I'm making an assumption here that he means through meditation, but it's an assumption based on the text we read so far. But as we'll see when we go further, it's also again explicit. So let's begin. Book 3. I should maybe stop. Does anyone have any questions, ideas, thoughts, concerns that they wish to mention here? Like, feel free to type it in chat, say it over the mic on Discord if you want. Perfect. Another flawless explanation. Okay, 33. Just as a Fletcher straightens an arrow shaft, so this is already interesting. When we learned the Tao Te Ching, we had the exact same metaphor. Just as a Fletcher strains an arrow shaft, so too the discerning man strains his mind, so fickle and unsteady, so difficult to guard. Interesting. As a fish when pulled out of water and cast on land throbs and quivers, even so the mind is agitated, hence one should abandon the realm of Mara. Once again, what I find this both interesting is that both these metaphors existed in the Tao Te Ching in this exact order within one chapter from one another. Woeful indeed is to subdue the mind, so difficult to subdue, ever swift in seizing whatever it desires. A tamed mind brings happiness. Let the discerning man guard the mind, so difficult to detect and extremely subtle, seizing whatever it desires. A guarded mind brings happiness. So dwelling in the cave of the heart, the mind without form wanders far and alone. Those who subdue the mind are liberated from the bonds of Mara. Wisdom never becomes perfect in one whose mind is not steadfast, who knows not the good teaching and whose faith wavers. There is no fear for an awakened one, whose mind is not sodden by lust nor afflicted by hate, and who has gone beyond both merit and demerit. Realizing that this body is fragile as a clay pot, and fortifying this mind with a well-fortified city, fight out Mara with the sword of wisdom, then guarding the conquest remain unattached. Ere long, alas, this body will lie upon the earth unheeded and lifeless, like a useless log. Whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, beautiful, or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts on oneself greater harm. Neither mother, father, nor any other relative can do greater good than one's own well-directed mind. Okay, this is interesting. Come on, man. Let's begin. So, he starts off with an interesting metaphor. The Fletcher straightens the arrow shaft. I'm not sure if you've ever made arrows or seen someone make arrows, but what you do is you start off with like some obviously non-straightened piece of wood. So you can't use completely dead and dry wood or else it will just break immediately. So what they generally take is slightly living wood and they straighten it. Women respect this as it did on RuneScape. Okay, good. So you understand the process fully then. So just as a person should straighten an arrow shaft, like they're making a tool as a weapon almost, but a weapon of defense in this case, so too the discerning man strains his mind. Because the mind naturally is weak, and we have to be on guard, and we have to be ready to defend ourselves. And so, what does he like this to? Like a fish out of water, that it throbs, it quivers, but eventually it dies. Like if we try to exist within the realm in which we were born, the natural way of our perception, the natural way of thinking, there's no real chance for us. We have to put ourselves on the defense. It's immediate kind of rejecting that you have everything you need to when you're born. This requires work and effort, right? It's a discerning man, he says. So wonderful indeed. He says one should subdue the mind, because the mind is something that needs to be tamed. There's all these thoughts, sensations coming from all over, and we need to be able to guard them and understand them. At this point, what he's speaking about is from a moral perspective, that we shouldn't consider things like hatred, things like quarrels, which you mentioned in the first 2 books. So the mind will seize whatever it desires, he says. Instead, what we must do, we must guard it. And when we guard it, we'll bring happiness. Because an untamed mind will lead us to unhappiness. This is what he's saying. A person who doesn't tame their mind, it can go anywhere. It can do anything. It can move on from thought to thought, idea to idea. And generally, it's not going to lead us down places that we really desire to go. But a guarded mind will keep us safe and protected. Now, this is an interesting line. that we have to kind of do a little bit of analysis for. He says there is no fear for an awakened one, whose mind is not sodden by lust nor afflicted, and who has gone beyond both merit and demerit. I mean, this is a big line. First off, he uses the word fear, which we really haven't seen yet. So he says there's no fear for the awakened one, for an awakened one who has emancipated their mind to a certain extent, if not fully. And fear to him is a bad thing. Fear is an unguarded mind. It's something that we have yet to really control. To him, fear is not something that really exists. It's only within our flawed perception that we have fear. I mean, this is, rather clear from a meditative process, like particularly upon like the concepts of impermanence. But fear is something man perceived. It's not something that we're supposed to live with. We're allowed to move on from it. And who's gone beyond both merit and demerit, which is a concept of, he doesn't say gone beyond demerit. This is a concept of removing oneself from judgment. You know, this is a very three characteristic sentence. Like generally what they say is that the ultimate benefit of impermanence, like going through path fruition of impermanence, is that you remove yourself from the concept of a past and a future. That the past disappears, it's not real, it's rejected. The future is yet to be, it's also not real. And when such a thing happens, you live only in the present moment. And when you live only the present moment, you can't fear the future, have anxiety over the past. Regarding when you go through the door of not self, what you do is you see a disconnect, a depersonalization, that everything within your perception, within your sensation level is not you. This includes things like lust or hatred or emotions, which is now the second part of the sentence. And the third thing, the third characteristic, the third door of unsatisfactoriness, when someone goes through it, they remove themselves from judgment. They find that sensations are innocent. They're just little spinny things that move. They go here, they go, they come, they go. They're impermanent. They're not us. And generally, they're unsatisfying. But when someone sees this on the deepest levels of meditation, what they understand is that the sensations haven't done anything wrong. It's our flawed human perception which has applied judgment to them. The reason why things make us angry, sad, scared, has nothing to do with the sensations, but has to do with our own human perception. And when we see that at a high level, we move beyond the concept of judgment. I mean, so this is very much like a three characteristic sentence. I also see here that there's a I mean, that's interesting. It's also interesting that all three together in the same sentence. And then in sentence 42, he also says something very interesting. Whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy or hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts oneself greater harm. Like he doesn't say it doesn't say a person to his enemy or a person hates another. He seems to conclude that an enemy does it to another enemy, or a hater does it to another hater. That it doesn't really matter the personification. It doesn't matter the actual case of what's happening. It's the idea of causing someone to be an enemy in your mind and causing hatred in yourself. That's what the indirected mind is. Not the action, not what actually happened, not what you do, but what happens in the mind. And this is what's the greater harm is. And purifying our own mind is the greatest thing we can do, according to him. So that's the third book, in my opinion. I'd love to have some discussion, ideas, have people talk about them. Does anyone have anything they want to say? Says Andrea.
That sounds pretty cool.
I think so. Andrea says, so for one understanding from this is that we will all have the emotions. We will move beyond the judgment of emotional states and be able to move forward with life. Or am I getting this incorrect? Okay, so I extended far beyond the text. The text doesn't say this directly. What I was noticing though is that in sentence, where was it again? Sentence 39 of the third book, that the three things which he mentions, he talks about the awakened one. Who's an awakened one? The three things which he mentions are the three central benefits stemming from the three characteristics. And it's explicitly those. And also it's in the same order that they're usually taught. So I'm just trying to mention that this is most likely on purpose. He doesn't say this directly, but the point being is that an awakened one has gone through these three doors, and that they understand impermanence, not self, and unsatisfactoriness at a high level. They've removed from themselves fear, the sense of self, and need for lust or hatred, other emotions that are negative, and that they've removed themselves from judgment. That's what I'm saying. I'm extending beyond the book, but it doesn't say that directly, but I think it's what it's alluding to indirectly. Mr. Respecter, we're studying Dhammapada. We're on book 3. We're about to move to book 4. Very good. Let's go. Book 4, Flowers. Let's begin. Who shall overcome this earth, this realm of Yama, and this sphere of men and gods? Who shall bring to perfection the well-taught path of wisdom as an expert garland maker would his floral design? The striver on the path shall overcome this earth, this realm of Yama, and this sphere of men and gods. The striver on the path shall bring to perfection the well-taught path of wisdom, as an expert garland maker would his floral designs. The striver on the path. Realizing that this form is like froth, penetrating its mirage-like nature, and plucking out Mara flower-tipped arrows of sensuality. Go beyond sight and the king of death. As a mighty flood sweeps away the sleeping village, so death carries away the person of distracted mind, who only plucks the flowers of pleasure. The destroyer brings under his sway the person of distracted mind, who insatiate in sense desires, only plucks the flowers of pleasure. As a bee gathers honey from the flower without injuring its color or fragrance, even so the sage goes on his alms rounds in the village. Let none find fault with others, let none see the omissions and commissions of others, but let one see one's own acts, done and undone. Like a beautiful flower full of color, but without fragrance, even so fruitless are the fair words of one who does not practice them. Like a beautiful flower full of color, and also fragrant, even so fruitful are the fair words of those of one who practices them. As from a great heap of flowers, many garlands can be made, even so should many good deeds be done by one born immortal. Amortal, not immortal. Not the sweet smell of flowers, not even the fragrance of sandal, targera, or jasmine blows against the wind, but the fragrance of virtuous blows against the wind. Truly, the virtuous man pervades all directions with the fragrance of his virtue. Of all the fragrances, sandal, tigara, blue lotus, and jasmine, the fragrance of virtue is the sweetest. Faint is the fragrance of tigara and sandal, but excellent is the fragrance of the virtuous, wafting even amongst the gods. Mara never finds the path of the true virtuous, who abides in heedfulness and are freed by perfect knowledge. Upon a heap of rubbish in the roadside ditch blooms a lotus, fragrant and pleasing. Even so, on the rubbish heap of blinded mortals, the discipline of the supremely enlightened one shines, resplendent in wisdom. Incredible. So again, this is kind of my lacking. Maybe I didn't know it was going to come up so often, I forgot. But I should learn the theology of Buddhism, because I don't exactly understand the function of the gods and their particular attributes. But let's review, and then we'll go to questions. So he says, who shall overcome this earth? Right? That we live in this physical world. It's flawed. It's failing in many ways. A striver on the path overcomes this world, is what he says. The path for the Buddha is, again, I believe what is generally called the meditative path. A person who goes to purify their mind. Maybe at first it begins with, purification of the body. but it ends up being purification of the mind through meditation, which is perfectly clear later on in the book. And he says, Mara, which Zeph properly says is a demon, but I think it's also like there's some Mara. I imagine is evil. Is a personified evil. I mean, the etymology of the word is obviously that of evil. That's what Mara means in a lot of languages. But that this evil is like contrived and exists within a lot of physicality, and it's also somewhat hidden. And that's very easy to miss it. It's very easy to be subdued by it and killed by this thing. And so we have to be careful. That it sways itself, and this evil sways itself not by a person attempting to do evil, but by a person who has a distracted mind, who has not who insatiates himself with sense desires, right? So like this is kind of where this book is somewhat differing, is that it's not saying that an evil person is evil. It's saying a person with a distracted mind will come to do evil through physicality. That's just the simplicity of it. So instead, what should we do? We should be a sage. Now, a sage is like a bee who gathers honey from a flower, right? Right. You see also here that you see it's in a lot of older books. They don't know where honey came from, but he gathered pollen in this case from the flower, and he didn't injure the color, the fragrance. Right. He participated in the world, but without harming it in any way. Right. This room of physicality. That although he exists, because he has an undistracted mind, it's as if he's not really there. The flower doesn't feel it. Other people don't feel it. In that case, he's different. And also, like a flower, we too should be fruitful with fair words, that we should practice good practices, that we should become a good person. And then when we do this, we can build many different things, right? A flower can bloom, and from a flower comes other flowers through its seeds, and you're able to build garlands to share with many people. But of all the scents, he's continuing like with many different metaphors concerning flowers. That just as flowers smell good, that so too here in the metaphor we consider like virtue to be a fragrance. And it's the sweetest fragrance of them all, by doing a good person, by removing our mind from distraction, by not insatiating ourselves within the sensate world. These are ways in which we become virtuous, and we become heedfulness, again as he quotes, and we become freed. Why? Because we're freed through perfect knowledge. We remove ourselves from this like level of evil. He says, even upon like a whole bunch of garbage, if there's a sweet fragrance, it comes through. So you can't concern yourself with what other people are doing or what's occurring within the world. Thank you, Jupiter. You can't concern yourself with these things. What you have to concern yourself with yourself and your own personal virtue, quote unquote, your own personal fragrance. Thank you. Let me shut this off. I was just posting things from a long time ago. So even so, on the rubbish heap of blinded mortals in discipline, a supremely enlightened one shines resplendent in wisdom. What he's saying is no matter what occurs, that you should sit there and try to be virtuous, you should try to free your mind, remain undistracted. This is the metaphor of the flowers. There's 3 separate metaphors here. Does anyone have any questions, ideas, thoughts, disagreements? Like, please feel free to type it in chat or Twitch, Discord, say it over the mic. And thank you to all the people here on Twitch. There's quite a few people here.
What book is this?
Okay, so we're going through, I'll post the PDF in chat. This is the Dhammapada. It's a part of the Pali Canon. I'm not a Buddhist, so like I'm not a good person to ask about Buddhist questions. But this is a kind of a one-off book in the Pali Canon that comes to explain a lot of things about virtue and meditation. And so we're just reviewing it, we're studying it together, we're trying to see what we can learn from it, discuss it as a group.
That's cool. I'm not a Buddhist either.
Yeah. This is generally a meditation community, not really a Buddhist one. You get a lot of trash
Yeah.
from it.
I got that.
So I think someone's typing, so let's give it a second.
Which Discord channel is this in?
You're currently here. Oh, no one's actually typing anything. Hashtag study group.
Oh.
Right above. Andrea says, so flowers equal virtue and practice of meditation. So he hasn't used the word meditation yet. He called it like purification of the mind. So we'll have to see exactly what he means by that. Does he mean it directly through improving your virtues by doing good things, or does he mean it through meditation? We'll see. I mean, it becomes much clearer. Yeah, but in this particular thing, the flowers have represented a few things. It's represented something that we should be, that a sage is like a bee who takes from the flower pollen and helps, improve the world, but doesn't damage, the flower, doesn't really get too involved in the world outside of that. And that just as flowers have good fragrances and it builds positive things, even in a world amidst negative things, that we should continue to be like these things.
Hello?
Hello, welcome.
I was just wondering if my mic was working. I saw this channel advertised on Reddit.
Okay, very cool. Oh, welcome. Incredible. Oh, Andre, it's just complicated. So I'll post a PDF in hashtag study group. Yeah, feel free to follow along. We're about to go to the next chapter.
Are you explaining a metaphor, basically?
Yes. Okay, so let's go further. Book 5, Dhammapada. Though generally what happens here is I'm going to read through the entire chapter, then I will offer an explanation, and then we'll kind of discuss as a group. I'll read questions and do my best to provide answers to the best of my own ability.
Well, what's the question?
There is none right now. We're going to read chapter 5 now. The PDF's in study group if you want to follow along. So chapter 5 says, The Fool. Sentence 60. Long is the night to the sleepiness, long is the league to the weary, long is worldly existence to fools who do not know the sublime truth. Right, so we're talking about fools here. Should the seeker not find a companion who is better or equal, let him resolutely pursue a solitary course. There is no fellowship with the fool. The fool worries, thinking, I have sons, I have wealth. Indeed, when he himself is not his own, whence are his sons, whence are his wealth? Right? A fool who knows his foolishness is wise at least to that extent, but a fool who thinks himself wise is a fool indeed. Though all his life a fool associates with a wise man, he is no more comprehending the truth than the spoon tastes the flavor of the soup. Though only for a moment discerning person associates with a wise man, he quickly he comprehends the truth, just as the tongue tastes the flavor of the soup. Fools of little wit are enemies unto themselves, as they move about doing evil deeds, the fruits of which are bitter. Ill done is that action doing which one repents later, and the fruit of which one weeping reaps and tears. Well done is that action of doing which one repents not later, and the fruit of which one reaps with delight and happiness. So long as an evil deed is not ripened, the fool thinks it is sweet as honey, but when the evil deed ripens, the fool comes to grief. So month after month the fool may eat his food with the tip of the blade of grass, but he still is not worth a 16th part of those who have comprehended the truth. Interesting. Truly an evil deed committed does not immediately bear fruit, like milk that does not turn sour all at once, but smoldering. It follows the fool like fire covered by ashes. To his own ruin the fool gains knowledge, for it cleaves his mind and destroys his innate goodness. The fool seeks undeserved reputation, precedence among monks, authority over monasteries, and honor among households. Let both laymen and monks think that this is done by me. In every work, great and small, let them follow me. Such is admission of the fool. Thus his desire and pride increase. One is a quest of worldly gain, and quite another is the path to Nibbana. Clearly understand this. Let not the monk, the disciple of the Buddha, be carried away by worldly acclaim, but develop detachment instead. Incredible. Let's go through slowly. We'll do some explanation and we'll chat. So the fool. The first sentence is revealing. He says, long as the night is sleepless, to the sleepless. The sleepless are the people who are not building their virtues, not building their meditation. They're just existing within this physicality, which causes them to have a distracted mind, which can cause them to do, I'm not sure evil is the right word for Mara. I feel like it's do not good. I don't know. It seems weird, but to do not good. So, but long is the league for the weary, long is the worldly existence who knows not the sublime truth, right? The point being is that many people exist within this foolish type of state, and they don't know. So instead, what we should do is we should seek out a companion, someone who is better or equal than us, someone that we can grow with. But if we can't find some person, we should be by ourselves. We should not associate ourselves with worse individuals. By this, it means more foolish individuals. Because the fool thinks that they have this, that they have money, they have family, they have all these, beautiful things around them, so that they're fine. But the truth is that these are not his. They belong to the world. All that he really has is kind of his own mind that he's yet to purify. This is a bit controversial. So, a fool doesn't understand the truth, even when he sits with a wise man. He says a very beautiful metaphor here. He says it's like a spoon that tastes the flavor of soup. Like, it's just something that, although may be immersed and fully immersed and may even hold it, it doesn't enter the spoon. So our first thing is to become not a fool. So how does a person do this? That we discern and we associate ourselves with wise men who comprehend the truth, and then we begin to taste. We avoid the other fools, the people doing evil deeds, because all that they do is create bitter nonsense. Causes weeping, reaps tears, etc. Non-positive things. But if we work hard, and we work hard on our actions, then we will reap delight and happiness. There is a level of repentance here which is acceptable, but when we do bad things, we shouldn't do bad things with intention to repent in the future. He brings another interesting metaphor. He says the fool doesn't understand truth, doesn't understand fruit as it's ripening. Right? If you plant a tree in bad soil, garbage soil, or if you plant a tree in good soil, they will produce different tasting apples in the apple tree. The tree built in good soil will have good apples, bad soil will be bad apples, but they look the same as they're on the tree. And the evil person or the bad person cannot discern between the two. Why? Because they don't understand the foundation underneath it. They don't understand the growth process. They understand how fruit is grown. All that they can see is the fruit with their eyes. But the wise person understands the foundation, the dirt, what makes it up. He understands how to water it. He understands how to grow it, when to take care of it, how to nurture it. And that way his fruit is ripe and beautiful in the end. And it tastes delicious, as opposed to I would call him wicked, but the evil individual, he's just confused, and at the end he walks away with nothing that's worthwhile. And then to continue my polemic against r/Buddhism, which consistently gets upset at me, he says here in 73, he says the fool seeks undeserved reputation, precedence among monks, authority over monasteries, and honor among householders. He says to himself, that both laymen and monks think that is done by me, and every work, great and small, let them follow me. Such is the ambition of a fool, thus is his desire and pride increase. Because his quest is that of worldly gain, which is quite another from the path of Nibbana, which is through emancipation of the mind, as we said in the first book. Clearly understanding this, let not the monk nor disciple of the Buddha, meaning no matter their status within the community, be carried away with worldly acclaim. Instead, we must develop detachment. Incredible. So, regarding chapter 5, does anybody have anything they wish to discuss, or questions, or ideas? Feel free to type them or say them if you want. Andrea says, ignorance equals Mara. I have to look this up. Mara Buddhism. It says, demon in Wikipedia. I generally don't like Wikipedia. A seducer. This is rather this is actually rather revealing, isn't it? Mara in this case is a seducer. And in this case, it's being seduced by the physical claim. Like in the previous chapter, it talked about Mara being like flowers, that it's ingrained within the earth, and it seduces us, right? We think that the physical world is great, and we think that these sensations are permanent and that they're us and that they're satisfying, right? So that's very interesting. Mara means to die or disappear, right? Because physicality disappears, it's impermanent. Instead, we're trying to play a bigger game here. Ignorance, what you're saying, Zeph, I think accepting that we're ignorant of the truth and trying to learn the truth is an important quality. Most people remain ignorant, right? They think that the bad fruit is a good fruit. They don't know. They don't have a good teacher. Nibbana is nirvana, same thing. That's a good point. I'm glad we looked that up, actually. Probably should have looked that up before. Anything else? Get some people typing. We're all learning tonight, thank goodness. It's a beautiful text. Buddha has probably one of the most incredible set of metaphors and teachings that I've ever seen. Because like the way that I would write something like this, if I were to write a book on virtue, a book on meditation, on what to do, what not to do, I'd write it in a very strict legal format. Right? I guess that's my Jewish instinct. This is far more flowery, literally. So next, the wise, right? Chapter 6. We move on to the wise, which is the counterpoint to the fool, the person we just spoke about. He says on 76, and I'll post the PDF in Twitch chat again, should someone want to join. He says, should one find a man who points out faults and who reproves? Let him follow such a wise and sageous person as one who would guide to hidden treasure. It's always better and never worse to cultivate such an association. Let him admonish, instruct, and shield one from wrong. He indeed is dear to the good of the detestable, to the evil. Do not associate with evil companions. Do not seek the fellowship of the vile. Associate with the good friends. Seek the fellowship of noble men. He who drinks deep in the Dharma, lives happily with a tranquil mind. The wise man who delights in the Dhamma, made known by the noble one, quote unquote, the Buddha. Irrigators regulate their rivers. Fletchers straighten their arrow shafts. Carpenters shape the wood. The wise control themselves. We've already said. Just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame. On hearing the teachings, the wise become perfectly purified, like a lake deep, clear, and still. The good renounce attachment for everything. The virtuous do not prattle with the yearning for pleasures. The wise show no elation or depression when touched by happiness or sorrow. Incredible. He is indeed virtuous, wise, and righteous, who neither for his own sake nor for the sake of another does any wrong, who does not crave for sons, wealth, or kingdom, and does not desire success by unjust means. Few among men are those who cross to the farther shore. The rest, the bulk of men, only run up and down the hither bank. But those who act according to the perfectly taught Dhamma will cross the realm of death, so difficult to cross. Abandoning the dark way, let the wise man cultivate the bright path. Having gone from home to homelessness, let him yearn for that delight in detachment, so difficult to enjoy, giving up sensual pleasures with no attachment. Let the wise man cleanse himself of defilements of the mind. Those whose minds have reached full excellence in the factors of enlightenment, who having renounced Acquisitiveness? I know it comes from a word. I need to look this word up, sorry.
Acquisitiveness.
Acquisitiveness. Excessive interest in acquiring money or material things. So it's about acquiring. Who have renounced acquisitiveness, rejoice in not clinging to things. Rid of cankers, glowing with wisdom, they have attained the Bana in this very life. Beautiful. Let's review. What's he saying here? We're providing a counterpoint to the Fool, the book that we had just learned last chapter. It says, so what do the wise people do? They seek out someone who will point out your faults and will reproof you. This is a sageous individual, and it's good to cultivate these types of associations. Why? Because we mentioned in the previous book, what does the fool do? They follow with people who are lesser than them, people who are their equal but evil. Instead, we need to seek someone who can find our weaknesses and help us grow. That's the main point. We're trying to be growth-oriented here. So let him admonish, instruct, and shield you, and then you will become good, and evil will become detestable. So avoid evil companions, avoid associationship with the vile. Instead, find good friends and noble men. So what do? We have to drink deep in the Dhamma, the truth of the Buddha, the truth of enlightenment, purification of the mind, and then you will live happily with a tranquil mind. So now we go to a metaphor. Irrigators regulate their rivers, fletchers straighten arrow shafts, carpenters shape wood. Right? They have control over their tools and they have control over their art. Right? Irrigators art rivers, fletchers art shafts, and carpenters art wood. Like they use their tools to shape this. So too the wise control themselves. They shape their mind. And that just as like a rock is not shaken in the storm, right? It stands still. The wind, the rain doesn't affect it quickly. The wise too are unaffected by praise or blame, like the concept of not self. They hear the teachings, they become purified. Now this is also interesting. The word on hearing the teachings. Explicitly hearing the teachings. He's not talking about meditation here. He says they become perfectly purified, like a lake, deep, clear, and still, just upon hearing the teachings. Like there's a contradiction here. He said in book 1, he said recite little descriptor, practice lots. On year 2, on this part he says, hear the teachings, become perfectly purified. Maybe it's the difference between reading and hearing. I don't know. I mean, that's obviously the best way to solve such a contradiction is to say the difference is that when you're with a wise person, you hear the teachings directly from their mouth, meaning you're not reading, but you hear them from their mouth, so you have nuance and they can direct you one-on-one. Then you can become perfectly purified. Zeph says, maintain the purity by practice. Maybe, but it seems the only way I can solve the contradiction thus far is by saying that reading isn't good enough. You need to have a teacher one-on-one. That solves the contradiction immediately. But still, purification is possible just by teachings alone. So it's good to renounce everything, right? Be virtuous. Don't prattle on about pleasures. Don't worry about... He says, actually very interesting, the wise show no elation or depression when touched by happiness or sorrow. Again, this concept of non-judgment. It doesn't really matter what happens to you. That's our flawed human perception that things are good or bad, that they cause us happiness or sadness. The reality is that the sensations are innocent. They don't affect us. So the person who's wise is virtuous. He's rightful. He's righteous. He doesn't crave the nonsense of the fool, sons, wealth, kingdom. And he does not desire success by unjust means. Although he does say, by the way, that you can desire success to a certain extent. And the wise people cross the furthest shore. They get to the final destination. But they do not, where the fools barely don't even make it into the river. So here's what he says at the end. The wise man cultivates a dark path. They give up sensual pleasures, attachment. The wise man cleanse himself of defilements. And those whose minds have reached full excellence, it seems at this point saying from the teachings, and the factors of enlightenment, which maybe can come from teachings, having renounced other things, they rid themselves of bad things, they glow in wisdom, they attain nibbana in this life. Meaning it's possible to do now. It's not something that you have to die a million times, you can do it now. So that's kind of my summary. Does anybody have any questions, ideas, or thoughts? Thank you, Zeph. It's my pleasure. Thank you for coming. And I think we'll end on this chapter. You're wonderful. So what we'll do is we'll review very quick everything that we've learned. We read through chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6. 3 was about the mind. That's something that we need to straighten and purify. When we subdue the mind, the mind is naturally stuck within this physical world, and the physical world causes this delusion, this Mara, this seduction of what we believe the actual truth is. We see all these pretty things, we smell all these beautiful things, and we become attached to it. But what the wise person does is they're discerning, they straighten their mind, they liberate themselves from these ideas. They do this through improving their virtues and through learning the Dhamma. Getting involved in the other nonsense is just a seduction. Instead, what we should do is, considering the metaphors of the flowers, it should be like a bee, that we take the good things, but we unaffect the world, meaning we don't put too much on it. We relate to the world only to the extent that we need. Like the Buddha here is, I think, under the perception that bee collects honey from flowers and then they eat the honey. So we need to gather just enough to survive, but not take enough that it harms others, not be in the world enough that it causes damage to ourselves. The least amount possible. And when we do this, we create beautiful flowers. Like when we take the pollen and bring it to other flowers, etc., it creates more flowers. And from all these beautiful flowers, we create ourselves to be a good person. We become fragrant. We smell nice even amongst nonsense and bad things. And we're able to produce beautiful things throughout the world. Then he comes and he contrasts two groups of people, the fool and the wise. The fool are the people that spend their time with lowly individuals, degenerates, doing nonsense. Even if these people are being nonsensical and non-virtuous, should they even surround themselves by the wise, they'd be like a spoon that doesn't taste the flavor of soup. They can't absorb it. It's unrelated to them. Instead, what they need to do is they need to sit there and purify themselves and become a wise individual, spend time with people better than them, be growth-oriented. And if they do not, they'll be confused by the entire world. They may even think they're doing good, or they may think that they're enlightened, or they think that they're purifying themselves, but it's because they have yet to understand the foundation of virtue. He makes this incredible metaphor that a fool cannot understand what a fruit is when it's on the tree. He sees a fruit, like an apple, and he thinks that it must be ripe and delicious. But he doesn't understand how to properly plant a tree, that you must nourish the ground, you must water the ground, water the tree, nurture it as it grows, and pluck it when it's ripe. And then the apple's delicious. But from the eyes, all apples look rather delicious on the tree, or you think they may be. But the wise person builds a beautiful foundation. They nourish the ground, the tree, they take care of it, and then they consume the beautiful fruit. But the point being is that both the wise person and the fool sees the same thing on the tree. But the wise person's discerning. He knows what goes into building beautiful fruit. And that's why he's able to create things that are delicious and healthy and good for you, and good for the world. The wise person seeks out people who reproofs them, who helps correct them, who finds out their flaws and their errors, their faults, and instructs them properly. They don't seek evil companions. Instead, they drink deep in the Dhamma. They try to live their lives properly, in virtue. They try to seek out the proper teachings of the Dhamma and improve their lives. They renounce everything. They don't prattle on or yearn for pleasures. They don't seek sons, wealth, kingdom, or desire success of unjust means. Instead, they try to be like this bee who goes and sustains on himself on the least amount. They produce other flowers. They build beautiful fragrance for others, but without necessarily being too ingrained within the seductiveness of this world. They abandon the dark way, and they cultivate the bright path. And that's really it. That's those 4 chapters of the Dhammapada. I want to thank you all very much for coming. I will write up an article today or tomorrow to share with all of you that we can maybe read and discuss together in the Discord. If you haven't already, feel free to join our website, the Twitch, the Discord, whatever service. We do our best to try to learn about meditation together and to teach and to provide. Everything is absolutely free. It's always available to you. And I appreciate everyone for coming who did. Thank you again.